Good afternoon. It's just afternoon on Tuesday the 21st, and there's a weather window that's kind of opening up starting tomorrow for a passage across the last little bit of the Chesapeake. And whether I'm still tossing around the idea of going out to the ocean and bypassing Cape Hatteras all the way to, say, Beaufort or Charleston, or just going the 50 miles to Norfolk, Virginia and getting into the ICW and doing the Dismal Swamp route. So I'll make that decision at some point today. But before I wanted to tackle either one of those next few long legs, especially if I'm in the ICW, there's going to be a lot of motoring. I need to do a couple things on the boat. So the first thing I need to do is fix or replace this bow roller. So this is what the anchor runs over. It normally would be up at the front of the boat, of course, but you can see that's not how that's supposed to look. It's all chewed up. And the reason for that is back when I was in Penetanguishene, I broke the proper pin for that roller that looks like this. That would have had a round head on it, and that's a 3/8 by 4-inch pin. And the marina in Penetang didn't have either a pin or a bolt that would work, and so I was forced to make do with a 5/16 bolt. And I didn't notice until just yesterday that what that did was it allowed this roller to sit down enough that it wouldn't turn, and so the anchor chain has just been pulling over that and breaking it. So I have another one. I have a twin anchor roller at the bow, but this one is a 1/2-inch pin. So I can't replace the brown one with this one. So I'm gonna have to go to West Marine later today or the local hardware store to try and get some replacements. But if I'm gonna make that walk, I wanna make sure that the other project I have is under control. And so this, again, this is my Westerbeek 40. And this right here is what's called the raw water pump. And so the way this engine cools is water comes up through this hose. There's a through hull down here that I can turn on and off. It comes up through this hose and goes into this raw water strainer. So there's just a very coarse bronze strainer inside this cylinder here. And then once that water has passed through that strainer, it comes out and loops up and around into this pump. And inside this pump, it's rotating. There's a rubber impeller that goes over a cam and squeezes water out and then pushes that into the engine here, where it runs through the heat exchanger and then out through the exhaust. And that's what cools the engine. So I noticed at Hoppano's, after doing some other engine work, that this pump was dripping. Not a lot of water, but enough that it was noticeable. And what that means, I think, is that there's a shaft seal on the back side of this pump that needs to be replaced. So I'm gonna pull that pump off today and replace that seal, do a bit of a rebuild on it, and hopefully that'll be good to go to get me through the next stretch of the journey. All right, so the first thing we did, we turned off the through hull down here, and I've just pulled the strainer out of the raw water strainer, and this is what I found. So that's not bad, but you can see that's stuff that's been picked up by the boat as I travel through the water. It gets sucked up with the cooling water. So that's all cleaned out now, and I'll reassemble this before I move on to the pump itself. Okay, so next step was to remove this hose. And I've removed this hose clamp, and we'll be able to remove this once we get the pump pulled off. So then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, this stud up here was loose on the engine side, so that's not great. We'll see if we can get that settled up when we go to reassemble. But now this pump should just slide more or less right off of there. I'm gonna pause the video because I want to pay particular attention as I do this. Okay, so that's the back side of that pump. And that little, you see the little red ring around the shaft, that's the seal that we think is the culprit here. I'm also noticing there's a little bit of oil coming through from the engine side, so I don't quite know what to do with that piece of information. I suppose probably I should be taking those bolts out and pulling that. There's probably a seal in there that's also leaking, but again, that's a little beyond my expertise, and I don't have parts for that today, so there's no sense in going that far. I'm just going to stick to rebuilding this little pump here. Okay, so I started cleaning up the pump and this mating surface on the engine, and started to try and peel this off. I thought it was maybe a steel or bronze ring, but it's actually just like a paper gasket. And before I started, I made sure that this gasket that I've got in the rebuild kit is the correct one, so I can feel confident now taking that ring off, scraping it all clean. And I'm not sure if that is part of that gasket or if that is a separate ring that is breaking down and perhaps is the reason for my oil leak. So we'll keep going. I guess the other piece is there's the pump. This surface here looks really good, nice and clean, no concerns. I'm having trouble turning this by hand, so hopefully we can resolve that through this project. Okay, so I've got that paper gasket off now, and you can see it's left some residue behind here. I also took all the studs out, and you can see, if I can get that moving again, you can see that ring back there that I think is just a support ring, but that's what all those bolts or studs were threaded into. So I took that off to make cleaning this up a little easier. I'll start with this very gently, taking the paper off with this super thin and flexible, I think it's a glue applicator or something from Lee Valley. And then a brass bristled brush so I don't take any material off, and then I'll clean it up with some emery cloth and get that nice and smooth for accepting the next gasket. Okay, so that's cleaned up pretty nicely now. That surface is nice and clean. No high spots, no low spots. There's a little bit of a rusty spot here. I'm a little bit hesitant. I don't want to try and take any more material off than I have, but it's pretty smooth. I think it'll be just fine for accepting a gasket. And so I've cleaned up 3 studs and put them back in. And this is the one that the nut is seized on. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on that just yet until I absolutely have to. Okay, back to the pump. Okay, so there's the pump with the cover plate disassembled, right? We saw that perspective earlier. So this is the other side of the pump, and so this cover plate just goes on like that, and you can see that it's marked with in and out. And I always try and take a picture as I'm taking stuff like this apart, because I'm not very good at remembering how things work. But so it's a Sherwood pump, model number F85, right? I'm assuming the rest of that is just a serial number. So again, I try and do things in a way that I can't screw it up. So like the bolt and washers, I leave them in the patterns that I take them off. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I do. So what you're looking at here, this is the drive shaft from the engine, right? The engine shaft just slots into that keyway or slot, turns the pump, and so it sucks water in on one side. This little cam plate here has holes at both the inlet and the outlet, inlet and outlet. And so what happens is it sucks water in, and then as the cam compresses these veins, it forces water out into the outlet. So it's forcing water down here and into the engine, and then opens back up out here. It sucks water in here, compresses back down, and just goes around and around. So our goal today is we're going to pull this impeller out. We're going to replace the shaft bearings and seals, put it all back together. All right, so that last video was taken at 1:15 in the afternoon. It's now 3:15 in the afternoon. The impeller is still in the pump. So is the shaft. So I tried pulling the impeller out with pliers. It never works. I've never successfully pulled an impeller out with pliers. Tried convincing the shaft to move with a soft-faced mallet while I had the pump up on some wooden blocks. That didn't work. I soaked it with penetrating oil and went for a walk. I walked into town to the hardware store and got a little curly Q hose for washing off the anchor at the bow, and a roller. The bow roller had disintegrated since the North Channel cruise, so I replaced that. And now I've come back, tried to move that shaft, and it won't move at all. So I've packaged everything up, and I'm going to go ashore with the pump and the rebuild kit and some basic tools, and I'm going to beg the yard foreman at the professional boatyard next door to let me use their vise to try and press that out. Hope for the best. Okay, it's 4:30 and I am back now from the boatyard next door, where I was able to successfully get this pressed out. So that shaft had to come out, put this down, had to be pressed out that way. I was trying to press it out the other way, which stupid me. So when it came out, it was quite evident that the old lip seal had failed. The rubber seal piece was completely twisted and warped, and there's a spring in there that has disintegrated completely. So now, and you can see how awful gross that old impeller was. So now all that's left, I could not manage without a bearing press. I could not manage to replace the bearings, which would have been nice, but not necessary. The shaft turns really simply, really smoothly anyway. So now I just have to, I've greased the inside of that lip seal. I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit, put the key back in the keyway, try and get the impeller in here, and put this thing back together and get it back on the motor. Okay, pump is reassembled. I've aligned the slot with the key on the engine shaft. Paper gasket is on. Now it's just a matter of sliding it on. All right, so we have no leaks at the water pump, which is nice. That little fitting I was tapping on at the bottom of the water pump was to show that there were no leaks. That's where it was dripping previously. And at the back of the boat, still getting lots of water pumped through, which is the important thing. That means that the engine is getting appropriate cooling water. So that means that the impeller was installed correctly. It's engaged with the engine drive shaft and is turning and pumping water through. So that's all good. I'll monitor for a little bit. What I'm going to do is start cleaning up the mess, and then I'll monitor. I'll let this run for about 10 or 15 minutes, and unless I see something different than this, I feel like I'm good to go. I'm good to start. I wanted to have this done before I started the 800 miles of motoring in canals to Florida.